Hello, welcome to this chapter, and here in this video we're gonna take a brief look to some of the lines that arise from this structure. Basically, here white has bishop d3, which is checked in a different video, and white has a couple extra options that mostly arise from transposition, I would say, from different openings. And here we have bishop g5, and we have bishop b3. So bishop g5, it basically comes from the King's Indian mostly. I actually play it with white, but let me explain it. So the game is g6, knight c3, bishop g7, e4, castle d6, d3, and here bishop g5. It's an interesting take, like white wants to force h6 and then bishop d2, and later on queen d2 gets some greater effect, and here c5 is the main move, and if we play d5 and white and black tries to shift to a Benoni, and after knight f3, ed, cd, we get to the same position. So here rook e8 is our idea. Basically we want to take on e4, we want to create pressure on the open file, makes a lot of sense. And now knight e4 is actually a threat now, because let's say white just plays carelessly, obviously. We take on e4, and if white takes the queen on d8, we can take on c3 with a discovered check, and we want to take the queen. This is a very important take here, and now in case of bishop e2, that would prevent this maneuver, we can start with h6, and white doesn't really want to give up this bishop. Yeah, white just wants to develop and then maybe play bishop e3, knight e2. So now white is kind of forced to take on f6, otherwise the e4 pawn will be falling. Let's say bishop h4, we can keep up with g5, and now we take on e4. Basically we are just pawn up for nothing. Yeah, so white needs to defend, and here here we have some tricks, which is why you're here basically. c4 first. And after bishop c4, we covered that knight e4 is possible, and we will be having a lot of fun. Bishop c2, b5, another conceptual sacrifice. If knight b5, queen a5 check, and basically we are allowed to play knight e4 next, which this is very similar to a variation that was covered in a different chapter with bishop d3 in the main line of this instead of bishop g5. And white has a couple extra options here. Since we committed to c4, we need to understand how to react against a3, because white gained this square, and also we kind of force our pawn structure. So here I recommend knight d7. Yeah, we want to get the c5 square, and after castle, knight c5, and now we want to play queen b6, a5, and bishop a6, and maybe b4. Yeah, and it's very simple, I'd say. Like we have a lot of compensation if white tries to take the pawn, because for instance now bishop a6, knight c3, h6, we are forcing the white to exchange the bishop again, because if we take on e4 we are very much happy. And now this is just so good. Like white, for instance, the bishop on c2 and the knight on c3 just defend. They don't have any kind of presence on dark squares. And we just want to double the rooks on the b file, and b2 will be very much exposed. The knight on f3 doesn't help anything, like doesn't control any key black squares that can help improve the position for white. Like, okay, you're controlling e5, but e5 is not really a threat at all, and white doesn't really have any kind of maneuver. And we have an easy plan. And I usually leave the positions when our plan is much, much easier, and white is kind of suffering here for even holding the position. Yeah. So basically, this is a good example of how c4, b5, this dynamic works. Yeah, like if white castles, we just go for b4. Basically, we'll get the space, as much space as we want. Here, bishop a6. Very much straightforward. That's what I like about the Benoni. Sometimes the solution, most of the times, sorry, the solution is just dynamics. Go for it. And now bishop a4. This was a prep I did with white. Yeah, let's put it right here. Against a 2700 player. So this was a very specific prep for the game. And actually got an interesting position, but even at high depths, I only got like what, 0.20, 0.30 if you like the engine. It's not much. It was just for having a game, interesting game. And here the idea is white is giving up the pawn, but after knight d2, white wants to retake the pawn, yeah? And after rook e5, we exchange the bishops, and now knight c4. And black is more or less forced to take here. And after rook e7, after all the storm has happened, black still has a very strong bishop. And after queen d2, a6, it's a very smart move in order to, since this knight wants to go to c5, we start with a6 and now a5, and now the knight will go here. And okay, since I'm used to, as a GM, in the GM level, you are used to face preparations which, how to say it, which like your opponent will be very, very well prepared with black. And in this case, he was Amin, which is the best African player, that he only plays the King's Indians, so he knows it very well. So he found all the moves of the board, and basically I got a decent position, but I blundered out of time control. I mean, I even lost the game. So yeah, like, and after knight a6, knight c5, black more or less solved most of the problems, and maybe white can claim that has some initiative, but I don't see it very practical. I mean, I know what I was doing with white, but still didn't get enough, and I end up losing the game. So yeah, that's also proof that it's not that much for white, yeah. And basically after this, white has also another option, which is bishop e3. Bishop e3 again is very relevant if we are looking through the lens of the King's Indian, because if g6, knight c3, here bishop e3 is one of the main lines. So basically, if you know your opponent plays this, you can go for c5. Here there are different moves. Knight f3 is even possible. I mean, it's obviously, I'm not encouraging you to go through the King's Indian, but if you know your opponent plays this move order, you can also do it this way. Because some people, some people against the Benoni, straightforward Benoni, they try to go for f4 or maybe more critical stuff. But if you go through transpositions here, knight f3 is more or less a must. So basically, it's also a relevant position. And therefore, some people prefer to play directly against the Benoni, so they kind of use, like, make use of the same knowledge. They don't necessarily need to prepare something more. Like, in this era of chess, basically you can prepare almost anything. So you need to be efficient, yeah? You need to play something, the same thing against everything, and not try to have like 2, 3, 4 subtle ideas against everything. So now, after bishop e3, we play the same thing, b5. Oh, what a surprise. It's a risky. It's a critical option, but yeah, I feel it makes sense that, okay, you don't remember, you play b5. And here white has this different option, which is e5. Against bishop b5, again, we play knight e4, and against knight b5, we can play knight e4 because the pawn is not attacked anymore. So basically, e5 is the only reason why this position makes sense for white. White gives up the pawn, but takes the pawn on c5. And suddenly, this pawn is passed, but again, white is still 2 moves away from castling, so we can do some mishaps. Here we enter a very sharp position, so stay with me here, because here we need to play b4, yeah? This line is not really common, you won't be facing it very much, but okay, you need to know. So here we need to give up the pawn, you need to trust here. I don't know if you are religious, but sometimes you just need to trust. This is the move, yeah? At some point we will get some pressure to b4 and then b2 later on, so it's better to give up the pawn. And also, if we think, okay, what if we don't give up the pawn? We'll play rook e8, and now white just takes the pawn here, and the bishop is here, not here. And we prefer it on b4. As here we have some threats with a5, queen b6, we have some dynamics in our favor. That's why we play b4 first. But here, we'll start with bishop b4 to make a point here. We are threatening e4, e3, bishop b5, bishop d7, castle. And now we take and we play e4. And basically, we will end up taking the pawn on d5, and more or less we solved everything, yeah? We have a pawn chain in the light squares that powers up our bishop, and we will be able to take on d5 and also threaten this bishop. So that's the key comparison. Like thanks to playing before, we will gain a critical tempo and we basically are on time to develop the rest of the pieces. So that's why this before is useful. And here, obviously, you might be wondering, okay, what if white just takes the exchange? We take with the bishop, and again, we have some things to take into account. First, white is still not castled. So again, don't count material until there is king safety. So when the king is safe and when the position is somewhat stable, then you can say, okay, let's count material. But if the king is not safe, bad things happen. Yeah. So now it's a knight a4, e4. We want to keep doing threats, and now e3. That's the key of the position. White gave up his dark square bishop, so white is weak in the dark squares. So here we are threatening to invade through the dark squares. Let's say after e3, we play bishop d6, and white cannot really prevent bishop g3 threat. Whoa, bishop g3 check. And the king will be left in the center. We will have plenty of time to develop the rest of the pieces. And also this rook won't be in the game. This knight is not doing much. And the king is very, very weak and exposed. So this is a great position to have some fun as well, let's say. And white, let's say if you play something like bishop c4, we could even take here. And now knight e4 check should be good. Like white has, where is the king going really? King g1, white has many problems on this diagonal, on this. Maybe we could start with queen c7, then bishop c5 is happening. Also, we are doing a double threat. We can also play somewhat with queen e8 and then look for bishop d7 to, whoops, I'm doing a lot of arrows, to kick this knight so the bishop can come out. Maybe we can just be happy to kind of close this rook and then put a nail in the coffin with h4, but okay, we also need to be realistic that white is also playing and white is also having some deep threats. So yeah, let's keep developing. Yeah, like maybe bishop d6, we don't allow this bishop to develop, and if knight c6 because white wants to get out, maybe queen h4, and again, this rook is not playing, this rook is not playing, this knight is not playing, we have a lot of pieces coming on, and white is into severe danger. So this is a great position that after b4, I'm pretty sure many people will just, okay, he thought he dropped the rook or not. You can do like Eric Rosen, no? Like, oh no, my rook. And the other option for white is to take on b5 with the bishop. Now, since white played e4, e5, this diagonal is not open, this knight e4 is not possible anymore. So we need to adapt. So we play e4. As usual, our solution is dynamics, knight e5. That's the only reasonable alternative. Like we are threatening knight d5. So white needs to do something about it. And yeah, like knight d2, knight d5 would be an extra option. And after knight e5, that's the main idea. And here, it's a very critical position. So yeah, here you will need to remember, let's say, because here we play a move that I don't know if you will face it, but it's knight h5. Yeah, it's not easy. This position is not easy. But after knight h5, we are threatening the knight that it's a bit out of bounds, and we want to play f5 at some point and kind of consolidate our really nice pawn chain here. White has a couple options. Let's first check the most active one. We take, and here again, we have a great example of how valuable is the castle. So here bishop a6 would give us amazing counterplay. And let's say white takes the rook and tries to play knight d2 to just castle. Yeah. Now we can play bishop d3. And bishop d3 has two purposes. We could just take on b2 later on and then claim back the exchange, yeah, because the rook is trapped. And we can also just take on d5 and claim that this position is actually excellent. Look at this beautiful bishop preventing the rooks from getting to active columns and files. So we have different kinds of compensation here that we can choose even. Yeah. So white can also take with a d pawn, and here we would play the most direct threat, which is queen a5 with random bishop takes f3, c3, and the bishop. Again, it's mind-boggling. I'd say when I was kind of doing the files and doing all the research on the variation as well, and on my analysis, I was like, all the moves are the most appealing moves. That's why maybe it was a success for me, the Benoni. After all, I don't know. It's food for thought. You can tell me. Tell me in the comments. Like and subscribe. So white needs to head back with the bishop, and also takes time to threaten the knight on h5. And here again we push for the initiative. Bishop a6. If white takes on h5, fine. White is not gonna castle. And also the rook on h1 is not gonna play anymore. So now we are aiming to take on c3, and then play rook d8, and then put the bishop on d3. And basically we'll have an impressive bishop here, and we will be able to take with a pawn and actually have a passed pawn, defend it, and then we can solve the issue with this knight. So that will be more or less the plan, which is a bit peculiar, but basically works very well. And this was a game from Shevchenko, which is one of the best players if you want to play sharp with black to follow, I would say. A very young guy from Ukraine. Actually, I think he has the Romanian flag now. And here white has the extra option of knight c4. Again, this line, you just need to, I'd recommend you to just, when you are checking this line, just do from memory, just review it a couple of times and try to understand, because it's a bit precise, and it's also, if your opponent plays it, is that your opponent started to doing something relatively deep. So yeah. So here we play bishop d7. We want to develop the rest of the pieces, and basically we want to challenge the b5 bishop. Again, we are doing a threat if you think about it, because bishop takes c3 check is a threat. And after bishop takes d7, we develop the knight. We play f5. White cannot afford to take because f5, and then this knight moves away, f4, and then rook e8, and we drive it from castling, then knight b6. We have a lot of dynamics in our favor. f5, d6. And basically white wants to play knight d5, and these two knights will be kind of well with each other. And here we have a move that we've seen plenty of times. I mean, this is just extra information, I would say. It's quite unlikely that your opponent plays until here, but after here we want to play f4. And it was important to give up the bishop, because now after here, knight f6, and we are threatening both the queen and the bishop, so the queen needs to move here. And now after f3, the position is just crazy for white. Like the king is not very safe. And all these pieces look nice, but they are white is not really creating any significant threat in the short term. The bishop on c5 is very weak and exposed. Actually, the bishop would need to get back here. And since white has a pawn on c3, it's not likely that the diagonal gets open soon. And we are entering the queen side very quickly with knight h5 or knight f4. For instance, something like g3, knight h5, and if white just wants to play like this, we could even sneak... maybe knight f4 could be interesting. Like now here, queen h5, queen h4. White defends, now we take here. This, I don't know, for me, looks very threatening. And we are planning to play rook f4 and rook g4 and mate. So yeah, like if queen d5 could be interesting in order to pin this rook. And here, rook e8, I guess, defending this. We are playing knight f6, knight g4. Like, the mate is coming, that's the thing. Like, all our pieces are just converging to the white king. And check how these two pieces are completely irrelevant to the defense. And the bishop on a3 is not doing much. This could be an example of how this could go. I mean, it's not precisely the best way for either of colors, but again, it's how the dynamics on this position favor us. Maybe here we can start with queen g5, which is the safest version, and need to give up the piece, but again, it's how you need to be thinking in these positions. So in general, this line, yeah, I mean, it's not likely, it's not one of you need to prioritize, but yeah, like this b5 and try to find the moves is very, well, it's a small line, but okay, you need to know it. Yeah, you need to do your homework and then go to the game and say, okay, I listened to Alvar, I paid attention to the video, and I said, yes, this one I need to memorize. It's not only about ideas, you need to know. But as you've seen, it's a lot about dynamics. It's a lot about the move you want to make. You want to counter white idea, you want to keep on the edge, and yeah, and maybe it's possible that you will find it on the board without even memorizing it. So yeah, no, this is a line I never really checked before this course. So yeah, you can imagine how popular it is. And actually, since I played with white, that's why I started checking it a bit more deeply. But yeah, it's a chapter that needs to be done. And yeah, hope you enjoyed, that you will have any kind of problems here. And yeah, and see you in another video.